The blood staining her cracked knuckles had dried to a rust-brown crust by the time Nathan Adler rode into the tanning yard on the outskirts of Marysville, California, looking for someone who could salvage the buffalo hide rolled behind his saddle. The summer heat of 1878 hung thick in the air, making everything shimmer like a mirage, and the smell of the tanning operation hit him before he even dismounted, a pungent mixture of lime, brains, and hard labor. He spotted her immediately, bent over a wooden frame, her dark hair escaping from a loose braid, hands working a hide with a curved blade that looked too heavy for someone her size. Her knuckles were split and bleeding, the skin around them raw and inflamed, but she never stopped moving, scraping away membrane and fat with methodical determination that spoke of desperation rather than skill. Nathan tied his horse to the post and walked closer, boots crunching on the dried grass. The woman didn't look up, too focused on her work, or maybe too exhausted to care who might be watching. He cleared his throat, and she finally raised her eyes, revealing a face marked by exhaustion and something harder, something that looked like the last threads of pride holding her together. She couldn't have been more than 23, maybe 24, with green eyes that had seen too much and a jawline set against whatever the world might throw at her next. "Looking for someone to work a buffalo hide," Nathan said, keeping his voice even. "Heard there was a tannery operation here." "Mr. Holloway owns the place," she replied, her voice hoarse. "He's in town. Won't be back until sundown." Nathan nodded, but his attention had shifted to her hands. The way she held the fleshing knife, the angle of her blade, everything about her technique was wrong, making the work 3 times harder than it needed to be. He had spent 2 years with the Crow tribe after his father died. Learning their ways and hide work had been part of that education. Watching her struggle felt like watching someone try to dig with a hammer. "You are tearing the grain," he said quietly. She stiffened, and color rose in her cheeks despite the exhaustion. "I am doing the best I can. Didn't say you weren't trying. Said your technique is wrong. You are working against the hide instead of with it." He gestured toward the frame. "May I?" Kathryn Keller looked at this stranger with his dust-covered hat and calm brown eyes, trying to decide if he was mocking her or if he actually meant to help. 6 months ago, she had been living in San Francisco, working as a seamstress in a decent shop, saving money for the future she had planned. Then her brother had gotten himself shot over a card game, leaving debts that somehow became her responsibility, and she had fled north with nothing but the clothes on her back. Marysville had seemed like a place to disappear, but disappearing required eating, and eating required money, and the only work she could find was here, in this hell of stinking hides and caustic chemicals that ate at her skin. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because I know what it is like to be new at something necessary," Nathan said simply. "And because watching you work that hide like that is painful." Despite herself, Kathryn felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. She stepped back from the frame, wiping her bleeding hands on her already stained apron. "Show me then." Nathan took the fleshing knife from her, testing its weight, then adjusted his grip. "First, you are holding it wrong. You want your thumb here, not here. Gives you better control, less effort." He demonstrated, his movements smooth and practiced. "Second, the angle. You are going almost perpendicular. You want maybe 30 degrees and you follow the natural lay of the tissue. Like this." He made a long, confident stroke across the hide, and a perfect ribbon of membrane came away, leaving the surface beneath clean and undamaged. Kathryn watched, transfixed. He made it look effortless, like the hide wanted to be cleaned. "The hide has a memory," Nathan continued, working as he spoke. "It grew a certain way, the fibers run a certain direction. You find that direction and work with it. The hide practically does the job for you. You fight against it, you will be here all day and tear up your hands for nothing." He handed the knife back to her. "Try it." She took the blade, adjusting her grip the way he had shown her, feeling the immediate difference in balance. She approached the hide again, this time watching for the lay of the tissue, and made a tentative stroke. The membrane came away cleanly, and she felt a surge of something she had almost forgotten: accomplishment. "Better," Nathan said. "Much better. Keep your wrist loose. Let the blade do the work." For the next hour, Nathan stayed, coaching her through the process, correcting her angle, showing her where to look for the natural seams in the tissue. He explained about brain tanning, about how the crow would smoke their hides to make them water-resistant, about the difference between buckskin and rawhide. Kathryn absorbed every word, her hands beginning to move with more confidence, the work becoming almost meditative instead of torturous. "You learned all this from Indians?" she asked, not looking up from her work. "Crow tribe up in Montana Territory. Lived with them for 2 years after my father passed. They taught me how to survive when I had nothing." He paused. Seemed only fair to pass it along. "What brought you to California?" "Cattle drive. I work for the Running Creek Ranch about 15 miles south. We brought a herd up from Texas, sold them in Sacramento. I am heading back tomorrow." He watched her hands, noting how quickly she adapted. "You have good instincts. In a few weeks, you will be better at this than Holloway himself." Kathryn laughed, a short, bitter sound. "If I last a few weeks, my hands might fall off before then." Nathan frowned, really looking at her knuckles for the first time. The splits were deep, and the inflammation suggested the beginning of infection. "You need to treat those. You have any salve?" "Cannot afford salve." He walked to his horse and rummaged in his saddlebag, returning with a small tin. "Comfrey and beeswax. The Crow women taught me to make it. Heals skin better than anything you will buy in a pharmacy." He held it out to her. Kathryn stared at the tin like it might bite her. "I cannot pay you. Did not ask you to." He pressed it into her hand, feeling the heat of infection in her skin. "Put it on tonight before you sleep and again in the morning. Keep your hands as clean as you can." She looked down at the tin, then up at him, and Nathan saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away fiercely. "Thank you. You are welcome." He picked up his rolled buffalo hide from where he had left it. "I will come back tomorrow before I leave, see if Holloway showed up. If not, maybe you can work this hide for me. I will pay you directly." "I would like that," Kathryn said softly. Nathan touched the brim of his hat and walked back to his horse, but he found himself looking back at her before he rode away. She had returned to her work, her movements already more confident, more efficient. Something about the set of her shoulders, the determination in the way she bent back to her task, despite the pain, settled into his chest and made a home there. That night, in a boarding house room that smelled of old tobacco and dust, Nathan lay awake thinking about green eyes and bleeding hands. He told himself it was simple compassion, that anyone would want to help someone struggling like that. But he knew he was lying to himself. There had been something in that moment when their hands touched as he gave her the salve. A current of recognition that felt like finding something he had not known he was looking for. Meanwhile, across town in the tiny room she rented above a stable, Kathryn carefully applied the salve to her ruined hands, feeling the immediate cooling relief. She thought about the cowboy with the kind eyes and the easy competence, the way he had helped her without making her feel small or stupid. Men in her experience wanted something in return for kindness. They always wanted something. But Nathan Adler had asked for nothing, expected nothing, and that unfamiliarity unsettled her almost as much as it comforted her. The next morning, Nathan returned to the tanning yard to find Kathryn already at work, her hands wrapped in clean cloth strips. She looked up when she heard his horse, and something in her expression made his heart kick against his ribs. "Holloway came back last night," she said. "He is in the shed if you want to talk about your hide." "In a minute." Nathan dismounted and walked over to inspect her work. The hide she had been working yesterday was finished now, stretched and drying, and the quality of the work was remarkable given how much she had struggled the day before. "You stayed late. Wanted to practice what you showed me. Wanted to make sure I really understood it." She unwrapped her hands, showing him the knuckles. The inflammation had already decreased, the splits beginning to close. "Your salve works miracles. Told you it would." He smiled, and she smiled back, and the morning suddenly felt brighter. Nathan conducted his business with Holloway, a gruff man in his 50s who barely looked at his own employee. He quoted a price for the buffalo hide that seemed fair, and Nathan agreed, but he asked that Kathryn do the work. Holloway shrugged, indifferent, and Nathan paid half up front with the understanding he would return in a week to collect the finished hide. Over that week, Nathan found reasons to ride into Marysville every day. He told himself he was checking on his buffalo hide, but the truth sat heavier than that, undeniable and frightening in its intensity. He brought Kathryn tools he thought might make her work easier: a better fleshing knife, a draw knife for scraping, a smooth stone for softening. He brought her work gloves made of soft deerskin. He brought her a lunch basket one day when he noticed she never seemed to stop working to eat. "You are going to make people talk," Kathryn said on the fourth day, but she was smiling when she said it. "Let them talk." Nathan sat on a barrel near her workstation, watching her hands move across the hide with growing expertise. "You have talent for this, real talent. Never thought I would be grateful for talent in hide work." She paused, looking at him directly. "Why do you keep coming back, Nathan?" It was the first time she had used his given name, and the sound of it in her voice did something to him. He could have dissembled, made a joke, kept things light and safe. Instead, he chose honesty. "Because from the moment I saw you, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Because you are the strongest, most determined person I have ever met, and being near you makes me feel more alive than I have felt in years." Kathryn set down her knife, her hands trembling slightly. "I have nothing. No family, no prospects, no future beyond surviving day to day. I am not what a man like you should want. What is a man like me? Good, honest, someone who deserves better than damaged goods." Nathan stood and walked over to her, close enough that he could smell the soap she used, see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "You are not damaged. You are surviving. There is a difference." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. "And I think you are exactly what I have been looking for without knowing it." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment before stepping back. "I cannot afford to believe in fairy tales, Nathan. I learned that lesson hard. This is not a fairy tale. This is just me, asking if I can see you properly. Take you to dinner, maybe walk along the river. Simple things." He smiled. "Well-lit public places so you know I am not an axe murderer." Despite everything, Kathryn laughed. "An axe murderer who makes healing salve and teaches hide-working techniques. That would be a very specific type of villain. Is that a yes?" She looked at him for a long moment, weighing risk against the unfamiliar flutter of hope in her chest. "Yes." "But Nathan, I need you to understand. I have been hurt before. I have been disappointed before. If you are going to change your mind, do it now before I start believing this is real." "I am not going to change my mind," Nathan said quietly. "I am a lot of things, Kathryn, but a man who gives his word, and then breaks it is not one of them." That evening, Nathan took Kathryn to the best restaurant Marysville had to offer, which was not saying much, but the food was hot and plentiful. And for the first time in months, Kathryn did not have to ration every bite. They talked about everything, about his childhood on a failing farm in Missouri, about her years in San Francisco, about the dreams they had set aside and the ones they still carried. Nathan told her about the Running Creek Ranch, about the work he did there, about his boss Daniel Montgomery, who treated his men fair and paid honest wages. "It sounds like you found a good place," Kathryn said. "I did, but it is not complete." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand carefully, mindful of her healing knuckles. "Come back with me. Not to the ranch, not yet. But there is a town, Cedar Falls, about 3 miles from the ranch. They need a seamstress. The last one moved to Sacramento." "You said you did that work in San Francisco." Kathryn's heart hammered. "Nathan, we have known each other for 4 days. I know, and if you need more time, I will give it to you. I will ride up here every week, court you proper, slow as you need." "But Kathryn, I also know what I feel, and I know it is not going away. You deserve better than working yourself to bone in a tanning yard for a man who barely sees you exist. You deserve a chance." She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw caution away and leap into whatever this was. But fear held her back, the fear of trusting again, of believing again. "Can I think about it, just for a day or two?" "Take all the time you need," Nathan said, and meant it. But circumstances intervened the next afternoon, when Kathryn arrived at the tanning yard to find Holloway angry and drunk, shouting about a ruined hide that had nothing to do with her work. She tried to explain, tried to show him that the damage had happened before she ever touched the leather, but he was beyond reason. He grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, called her names that made her feel sick, and fired her on the spot. Nathan arrived an hour later to find her sitting on the ground outside the yard, her few possessions in a cloth bundle beside her. One look at her face told him what had happened, and fury rose in him hot and immediate. "Did he hurt you?" He grabbed me. "I am fine." But her voice shook. Nathan walked into the yard and emerged 10 minutes later with his buffalo hide and a look on his face that suggested the conversation with Holloway had been pointed. He offered Kathryn his hand. "Come on." "Where?" "With me. If you still want to think about it, you can think while you ride." "But you are not staying here another night." Kathryn looked at his offered hand, at the honest concern in his eyes, and made her decision. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "I do not even have a horse. You can ride with me. We will get you a horse in Cedar Falls." He secured her bundle to his saddle and helped her mount, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and Kathryn let herself lean back against his chest, feeling safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. The ride to Cedar Falls took most of the afternoon, following roads that wound through golden hills dotted with oak trees. Nathan pointed out landmarks, told her about the area, kept up a steady stream of conversation that calmed her frayed nerves. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back, the strength in the arms that held her secure, and something deep inside her began to uncurl, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. Cedar Falls was larger than she expected, a thriving town with actual streets and proper buildings. Nathan took her to a boarding house run by a woman named Mrs. Patterson, a no-nonsense widow in her 60s who took one look at Kathryn's exhausted face and wrapped her in a motherly embrace that nearly broke her composure. "We will get you settled, dear," Mrs. Patterson said. "Nathan, you tell Daniel I will put this on the ranch account. This girl needs proper rest and proper food before anything else." Nathan paid in cash instead, ignoring her protests, and secured Kathryn a room for a full month. "That gives you time to get the seamstress work established, start earning. No arguments." Kathryn wanted to argue anyway, wanted to protest the charity, but exhaustion overwhelmed her pride. "I will pay you back. Not charity, it is an investment. I have 3 shirts that need mending." His smile was gentle. "Get some rest. I will come by tomorrow and introduce you around town." Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan made good on that promise. He introduced Kathryn to everyone who mattered in Cedar Falls, talked up her skills as a seamstress, even bullied the owner of the empty shop on Main Street into renting it to her at a reasonable rate. Kathryn found herself welcomed into the community with a warmth that still surprised her, and work began coming in almost immediately. Mending at first, simple repairs, but then more complex jobs, alterations, even a request to make a wedding dress. Nathan visited every day, sometimes just for a few minutes if ranch work kept him busy, sometimes for hours in the evening when they would walk through town or sit on the boarding house porch and talk until the stars came out. He courted her with a patience and steadiness that made her feel cherished rather than rushed. He brought her wildflowers, taught her to ride the gentle mare he bought for her, took her on picnics in the hills where they could watch the sunset paint the sky impossible colors. "I am falling in love with you," Nathan said one evening in late August, the words simple and direct. "I thought you should know." They were sitting by a creek, the water murmuring over smooth stones, and Kathryn felt her breath catch. "Nathan, you do not have to say anything back. I just needed to tell you the truth." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I have never felt this way before, Kathryn. Like I found the other half of myself that I did not know was missing." Kathryn turned to face him fully, studying his features in the fading light. His honesty, his kindness, the way he had never once made her feel less than for her circumstances or her struggles. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because what if it gets taken away? What if this is just a beautiful moment and then everything falls apart like it always does?" Nathan reached up and cupped her face in his hands. "Life does not come with guarantees, Kathryn. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise that I will be here, that I will fight for this for us, every single day. That is the only promise anyone can really make." She kissed him then, leaning in and pressing her lips to his with all the emotion that had been building for weeks. Nathan responded immediately, pulling her closer, the kiss deepening into something that spoke of longing and promise and a future that suddenly seemed possible. They stayed by the creek until full dark, holding each other, talking about the dreams they were beginning to share. Nathan spoke of wanting his own place someday, a small ranch where he could raise horses. Kathryn talked about building her seamstress business into something substantial, maybe even hiring help eventually. They wove their separate dreams together into something shared, something beautiful. Over the next 3 months, their relationship deepened into something unshakable. Nathan taught Kathryn everything he knew about horses, about reading weather, about surviving in country that could be unforgiving. Kathryn taught Nathan about patience in a different way, about finding beauty in small details, about how to talk through fears instead of burying them. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs, each other's hearts. In November, Nathan took Kathryn to the Running Creek Ranch to meet Daniel Montgomery and his wife Sarah. The Montgomerys welcomed her with open arms, Sarah especially taking to Kathryn immediately. Over dinner, Daniel offered Nathan a proposition. "I have been thinking about expanding the horse operation," Daniel said. "We have good grazing land in the north section that is just sitting there. If you were interested, Nathan, I would stake you to start your own herd. You would work it yourself, keep 70% of the profits with the understanding that you give the ranch first option to buy." Nathan looked at Kathryn, his eyes asking a question. She smiled and nodded, and he turned back to Daniel. "I am interested, very interested." "Good." Daniel grinned. "Because I had Sarah draw up papers already. Figured you would say yes, especially with the right motivation." He glanced meaningfully at Kathryn. That night, riding back to Cedar Falls under a sky brilliant with stars, Nathan pulled his horse to a stop on a hill overlooking the valley. He helped Kathryn down, then took both her hands in his. "I love you, Kathryn Keller. I love your strength and your courage and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I want to build a life with you, raise horses, raise a family, grow old watching sunsets from our porch." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. It is not fancy, but it is real, like what I feel for you. Will you marry me?" Kathryn felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of joy instead of pain. "Yes. Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting all along. They held each other on that hilltop. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen hope over fear and love over safety. They married in December, a simple ceremony in Cedar Falls with half the town in attendance. Kathryn wore a dress she had made herself, simple white cotton with lace at the collar, and Nathan wore his best suit with a new string tie. "Mrs. Patterson cried through the whole ceremony, and even hard-nosed Daniel Montgomery looked misty-eyed when Nathan kissed his bride. The Montgomerys gave them a week for a honeymoon, which they spent at a cabin in the foothills, learning each other in new ways, planning their future in detail. They talked about the house they would build, about the horses they would raise, about the children they hoped for. Everything felt possible, everything felt within reach. When they returned, Nathan threw himself into building the horse operation with single-minded focus. Kathryn continued her seamstress work, but also began learning the horse business, insisting that they were partners in everything. She had an eye for bloodlines that surprised even Daniel, and her gentleness with the animals made her a natural trainer. Together, Nathan and Kathryn built something remarkable. Their first year of marriage brought challenges, hard work that left them exhausted, setbacks when a fence broke and they lost 3 horses for 2 terrifying days before finding them. But it also brought joy, deep satisfaction in building something together, in falling into bed each night knowing they had given everything for their shared dream. In the spring of 1880, Kathryn discovered she was pregnant. Nathan received the news with a whoop of joy that could be heard across the valley, lifting her up and spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. They spent that evening making plans, choosing names, arguing cheerfully about whether they wanted a boy or a girl first. "I do not care either way," Nathan said, his hand spread across her still flat belly, "as long as you both come through healthy." "We will," Kathryn said with confidence she actually felt. "We are fighters, this baby and I." She was right. In November, Kathryn gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Nolan. He had Nathan's dark hair and Kathryn's green eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he had them both wrapped completely around his tiny fingers. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Nolan at night so Kathryn could sleep, talking to him constantly even though the baby could not possibly understand, showing him horses and explaining bloodlines to an infant who just blinked up at him. The horse operation thrived. By 1882, they had 20 horses and a reputation for quality that spread throughout Northern California. Nathan and Kathryn purchased land adjacent to the Running Creek Ranch, building a house with their own hands, Nathan doing the heavy construction while Kathryn managed the details and the finishing work. It was not fancy, but it was solid and it was theirs. every nail and board chosen and placed with love. Their second child came in 1883, a daughter they named Kimberly. She was quieter than Nalin had been, more observant, and as she grew, she developed a gift for understanding horses that exceeded even her mother's natural talent. Kathryn sometimes watched her daughter in the paddock, whispering to a skittish mare and calming it with just her presence, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built. The years rolled by, each one bringing its own mixture of challenge and blessing. There were droughts that made water scarce, winters that came early and hard, market fluctuations that required careful management. But there were also births of foals they had bred themselves, watching them grow into magnificent animals. There were Sunday dinners with the Montgomerys, who had become family in every way that mattered. There were evenings on the porch, Nathan and Kathryn in their rocking chairs, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. In 1885, they celebrated their 7th anniversary with a trip back to Marysville, partly nostalgia, partly business. They needed to pick up supplies, but Nathan also wanted Kathryn to see how far they had come from that day he had found her working hides with bleeding hands. They visited the tanning yard, which had changed ownership, and Nathan told the story to the new owner about the talented woman he had found there, how he had fallen in love watching her determination and courage. "Best decision I ever made," Nathan said, his arm around Kathryn's waist. "Riding into this yard and finding her." Kathryn leaned into him, remembering that desperate, exhausted woman she had been, how close she had come to giving up entirely. "Best day of my life," she said softly. "The day you saw me." That night, in the hotel room, they made love with the passion that had never diminished, that had only deepened with time and shared experience. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Nathan traced patterns on Kathryn's skin, marveling as he always did that she was his, that they had built this life together. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Tying yourself to a cowboy with more dreams than sense?" Kathryn turned to face him, placing her hand over his heart. "Never. Not once, not for a single moment. You saved me, Nathan. Not just from the tanning yard, but from the person I was becoming, hard and bitter and closed off. You showed me that it was safe to hope again, to love again. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Nathan corrected. "I was just existing before you, Kathryn. You taught me what it meant to really live, to build something that matters, to love someone so much that their happiness becomes more important than your own." They held each other in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from nothing but determination and love. By 1890, the Adler Ranch had become one of the most respected horse operations in Northern California. Nalin, now 10, was already showing signs of being a horseman to rival his father. Kimberly, 7, had a gift that bordered on supernatural, able to calm the most fractious animal with just her presence. Nathan and Kathryn had added a third child, another son named Nathaniel, who at 3 years old was already pestering to be allowed in the paddocks with the horses. They had expanded the house twice, adding rooms as the family grew, and the walls were filled with the noise and chaos and joy of a full life. Kathryn still did some seamstress work, mostly special projects for friends, but her focus had shifted to the ranch and the family. Nathan still rose before dawn every day, still worked until his back ached, but now he did it surrounded by people he loved, building something that would outlast him. On their 10th anniversary, Daniel and Sarah Montgomery hosted a party that brought together everyone who had been part of their journey. Mrs. Patterson came from Cedar Falls, older now but still sharp as a tack, crying happy tears as she toasted the couple she had taken under her wing. The ranch hands who had become friends over the years filled the barn the Montgomerys had decorated for the occasion. The children ran wild, playing with the Montgomery grandchildren, their laughter echoing off the rafters. Nathan stood to make a toast, Kathryn beside him, her hand in his. 10 years ago, I rode into a tanning yard looking for someone to work a buffalo hide, and I found the rest of my life. I found a woman with bleeding hands and an iron will who taught me that real strength is not about never falling down. It is about getting back up no matter how many times the world knocks you down. He turned to Kathryn, his eyes shining. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, this life we have built together, it exceeds every dream I ever had. I love you more today than I did the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise, for as long as I have breath. Kathryn stood and kissed him, not caring about the whoops and hollers from their friends, knowing only that this man, this life, this love was everything she had ever needed. When they finally pulled apart, she raised her glass. To second chances, to finding each other, to building something beautiful from broken pieces, and to the man who taught me that it was safe to hope again. The years continued their steady march. The children grew, each one finding their own path but staying close to the ranch and the life their parents had built. Nahlen eventually took over the day-to-day operations of the horse breeding, showing his father's eye for quality and his mother's gift with the animals. Kimberly became a renowned horse trainer, people bringing problem horses from all over the state for her to work with. Little Nathaniel, as he grew, showed a gift for the business side, for negotiation and deal-making that ensured the ranch's continued prosperity. Nathan and Kathryn grew older together, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes from years of squinting into the sun and laughing together. Their hands, which had once been marked by work and hardship, now bore the gentler scars of a life fully lived. Kathryn's knuckles never forgot those days in the tanning yard, aching when the weather turned cold, but Nathan would take her hands in his and massage them gently, his own skilled fingers easing the pain. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch they had built together, rocking in chairs that Nathan had made and Kathryn had cushioned, watching the sun set over land they had made bloom. The horses would graze in the pastures, mares with foals at their sides, continuing the cycle of life and growth. Grandchildren began to arrive, Nahlen's children first, then Kimberly's, and the house filled again with the sounds of young voices and running feet. Did you ever imagine this? Kathryn asked one evening in 1895, watching a granddaughter toddle after a patient old mare in the paddock. When you saw me in that tanning yard, bleeding and desperate, did you imagine we would have all this? Nathan considered the question seriously. I imagined loving you. I imagined building a life with you. But this, he gestured to encompass the ranch, the family, the legacy they had created. This exceeds anything my imagination could have conjured. This is the result of you, Kathryn. Your strength, your intelligence, your courage. I might have offered you a chance, but you are the one who took it and built something magnificent. We built it together, Kathryn insisted, as she always did. Everything good in my life came from that moment you stopped and offered to help. You could have ridden past. You could have judged me for not knowing what I was doing. Instead, you saw me, really saw me, and you offered kindness without expecting anything in return. That changed everything. It changed everything for both of us, Nathan agreed. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the familiar paths of scars and calluses, each one a memory, each one part of their story. I found you working hides with hands raw from the work, and I taught you the tricks I had learned, but you taught me so much more. You taught me about resilience, about grace under pressure, about love that does not quit even when things get hard. You made me a better man, Kathryn. She leaned her head against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence that had grown between them over the years, the kind of silence that only comes when two people know each other so deeply that words become optional. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and somewhere in the barn, Nalan was singing to the horses as he did his evening rounds, his voice carrying in the still air. "I want you to know," Kathryn said quietly, "that if I had to do it all over again, every hardship, every moment of fear and pain, I would do it exactly the same, because it led me to you, to this, to a life beyond anything I could have hoped for." Nathan kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, still familiar after all these years. "Same here. Every mile of that cattle drive, every moment of uncertainty, all of it was worth it to find you." They sat together as the darkness crept in, as the stars began to emerge in the deepening sky, surrounded by the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. The house behind them glowed with lamplight and the sounds of family, dinner being prepared, children being called to wash up, the everyday magic of a full life. In the years that followed, Nathan and Kathryn became the heart of not just their family but the entire community. Their ranch served as a gathering place, a symbol of what could be built with hard work and dedication. They employed dozens of people over the years, always treating them fairly, always remembering what it had been like to be desperate and struggling. They extended help to newcomers, offered advice to young couples starting out, became the elders people turned to when they needed wisdom or support. Daniel Montgomery passed in 1898, and Nathan spoke at his funeral about the man who had given him a chance, who had believed in his dream when it was nothing but words and hope. Sarah Montgomery followed her husband 2 years later, and Kathryn held the family together through their grief, organizing meals and support, being the steady presence she had learned to be. The new century arrived, and with it, changes that neither Nathan nor Kathryn could have anticipated when they started their journey. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though horses were still the primary mode of transportation in ranch country. Towns grew larger, more connected. The wildness that had characterized their youth began to fade, replaced by settlement and civilization. But through it all, the Adler Ranch remained, a constant in a changing world, adapting but never losing sight of the values that had founded it. In 1903, Nathan and Kathryn celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by 3 children, their spouses, and 8 grandchildren, with a 9th on the way. The party was held at the ranch, in the barn that had been expanded over the years to accommodate the growing operation. Friends came from all over the state, people whose lives had been touched by the couple who had turned hardship into triumph. Nalan stood to speak, his voice strong and clear. "My parents taught us that the measure of a life is not what you acquire but what you build. Not what you take but what you give. They built this ranch from nothing, yes, but more importantly, they built a family, a community, a legacy of kindness and integrity that will outlast all of us. They showed us that real love is not just the easy moments but the choice to stay, to fight for each other, to build something together even when it is hard. I am proud to be their son, and I hope to leave my children even a fraction of what they have given me." Kathryn cried, as she always did at moments like this, and Nathan held her close, whispering words meant only for her. Around them, their family and friends celebrated, but at the center of it all was just a man and a woman who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The final years of their active work on the ranch were marked by a gradual handing over of responsibility to the next generation. Nathan still rode the property every day, still checked on the horses, but Nolan had taken over the majority of the work. Kimberly's training operation had become famous, people coming from as far away as Oregon and Nevada to work with her. Nathaniel managed the business affairs with a skill that ensured the ranch's prosperity for generations to come. Nathan and Kathryn found themselves with time, finally, to simply be together. They traveled some, visiting San Francisco, where Kathryn showed Nathan the places of her youth. They went to Montana, so Nathan could try to find the Crow tribe that had taught him so much. And while the people had moved on, the land still held memories that he shared with Kathryn, bringing his past and his present together. In 1908, on a warm spring evening, Nathan and Kathryn sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Nathan was 71 now, his hair silver, his movements slower but still sure. Kathryn was 66, her face lined but still beautiful, her hands still scarred but healed long ago. They held hands as they rocked, watching yet another sunset paint the sky, comfortable in the silence of shared decades. "You remember," Kathryn said softly, "what you told me that first day. About hides having memory, about working with them instead of against them." "I remember," Nathan said. "I have been thinking about that a lot lately, about how life is like that. It has a grain, a direction it wants to go. You can fight it, tear yourself up trying to force it to be something it is not. Or you can find the grain and work with it, let yourself be shaped by it while also shaping it." She turned to look at him. "You taught me that, not just about hides, but about living. You showed me how to work with life instead of against it." Nathan brought her hand to his lips, kissing the scarred knuckles gently. "We learned it together. That is what the best partnerships do. They find their grain together." As the last light faded from the sky, they went inside to the house they had built, past walls covered with photographs chronicling the life they had lived. Their children, their grandchildren, the horses they had bred, the people they had loved. Every image was a testament to the choice Nathan had made 30 years earlier to stop and offer help to a desperate woman working hides with bleeding hands. The years rolled on gently. Grandchildren grew and married, bringing great-grandchildren who would never know the hardship their great-grandmother had endured, but would benefit from the legacy she and Nathan had built. The ranch continued to prosper, adapting to the changing times but never losing the heart that Nathan and Kathryn had given it. Nathan passed peacefully in his sleep in 1912, at the age of 75, with Kathryn beside him holding his hand as she had held it for 34 years of marriage. His funeral brought people from all over California, ranchers and cowboys, businessmen and families, all coming to pay respects to a man who had lived his life with integrity and kindness. Kathryn stood strong through it all, her grief private but her gratitude public, thanking everyone for celebrating the man who had been her everything. She lived 4 more years, staying active in the ranch operations, dispensing wisdom to her children and grandchildren, ensuring that the values she and Nathan had built the ranch on would continue. She spent her evenings on the porch, talking to Nathan as if he were still beside her, telling him about the foals being born, about the great-grandchildren's antics, about the life that continued all around her. Kathryn passed in the spring of 1916, at the age of 74, surrounded by the family she and Nathan had created. Her last words were about the day Nathan had found her in the tanning yard, how that single moment of kindness had changed everything, how grateful she was for every moment they had shared. They buried her beside Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch, under oak trees they had planted together 40 years earlier. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription that the family had chosen together. They found each other and built a legacy of love. The ranch continued for generations, always in the family, always carrying forward the values that Nathan and Kathryn had instilled. Their story became legend in Northern California, told and retold, the tale of the cowboy who stopped to help a woman with bleeding hands and found the love of his life. It became a story about second chances, about the power of kindness, about building something beautiful from broken pieces.